She had one rule: never fall for charm. Not the kind that smiles with certainty. Not the kind that smells like ambition and walks into a room like it owns the world. Especially not when it comes wrapped in a suit and speaks softly, like it's got nothing to prove. Nariah Lane had mapped out every hour of her life since she was 17. Graduate top of her class? Check. Earn a spot in a competitive biomedical program? Check. Land a research job in a real lab? She nailed it at 24. Live life on her own terms? That part was still in motion. She didn't do romance. She didn't do distractions. And she didn't do men who vanished by morning. But that night in Savannah, it didn't follow her rules. And the man she met, he didn't ask for permission to rewrite everything. What if your biggest mistake turned out to be the most meaningful moment of your life? What if one unexpected night, just one, reached into your future and left behind a forever? That's what happened to Nariah, a woman who had never needed saving, who trusted plans over people, who believed that love could cost you more than heartbreak. It could steal your future if you weren't careful. Have you ever been so focused on doing everything right that you missed the part of life that makes you feel something? Ever made a single choice that kept echoing for years? Maybe you've been where she was, at the edge of success but carrying wounds no one else could see. Or maybe you know someone like her, someone who's always in control, always responsible, always strong, until they aren't. Nariah never meant to fall. Not for anyone. She'd watched her own mother give everything for love. And in return, she got silence, loneliness, bills on the counter, and tears in the next room. That wasn't going to be Nariah's story. So when she met a man who listened differently, who asked questions like he wanted to know the whole person, not just the highlights, she didn't plan to stay. She didn't even plan to speak for long. But you know how it goes. No plan survives a moment of real connection. What do you do when the person you never expected shows up years later and meets the child you raised alone? Do you run again? Do you open the door? Or do you finally allow yourself to feel what you buried the morning after he disappeared? Stay with me. This isn't just a story about mistakes. It's about quiet redemption. The kind that doesn't need big promises or flashy endings. It's about a woman who chose herself, then chose love only when it showed up willing to stay. Now, let's begin. Because one night can change everything. Savannah in spring always had this way of looking like a postcard. Wrought iron balconies, magnolia trees blooming like they had something to prove. And the cobblestone streets, too charming to trust. But Nariah Lane wasn't there for scenery. She was there for efficiency. The Southern Innovation Tech Summit was in full swing, and Nariah was already halfway through her checklist. Check-in booths, organized. Speaker schedules, distributed. Panel rooms, labeled and mic-checked. She even fixed the badge printer when it jammed, without needing to call tech support. She wore her hair in a tight bun, had her badge clipped to her chest, and a pen tucked behind her ear. Not because it looked good, but because it saved her 5 seconds when someone needed something signed. "Lane," her supervisor called out, "you're magic. Can you escort the West Coast delegation to the very important person room?" "Already on it," she said, pulling up the schedule on her phone. That's how she found herself walking 3 sharply dressed men through the historic District Hotel's marble halls. All of them investors from California. All of them murmuring about acquisition trends, startup equity, and valuations like they were placing bets on horse races. All except one. He didn't say much at all. She noticed him the moment she opened the double doors, not because he was loud or posturing like the others, but because he wasn't. He was tall, with dark walnut skin and close-cropped curls, sharp jawline, dressed in a dark grey suit with no tie, collar open, like the meeting wasn't important enough to tighten up for. While the others talked, he watched. Not in a condescending way, but like someone who paid attention to things most people overlooked. When their eyes met, he didn't nod. Didn't look away either. Just held her gaze like a person who didn't need small talk to acknowledge presence. She turned first. She had work to do. That night, the summit hosted a mixer on the rooftop. A mix of investors, engineers, analysts, and exhausted volunteers making their way through platters of shrimp skewers and flat sodas in plastic cups. Naraya stood near the edge, her arms crossed, her mind still replaying tomorrow's logistics. "Is this your idea of relaxing?" A voice said from behind her. She didn't need to turn to know. It was him. "You don't remember me, do you?" He asked. "I remember all of you. I was the one with the clipboard." He smiled. "That's not what I meant. I meant the way you ran this whole thing like a mission control center." She gave a small shrug. "Someone has to keep order." He leaned on the railing beside her. "Does someone ever keep order for you?" She didn't answer. He didn't push. Instead, he stuck out a hand. "Lennon Dre." "Naraya Lane, you always this focused?" "Only when I don't want things to fall apart." His brow lifted slightly. "So, always?" She nodded. He looked at her like he wasn't just curious. He was impressed. They talked longer than she expected, about cities they'd lived in, programs they admired, the broken public school system, the importance of mentorship, how it felt to grow up being the fixer in your family. She told him about her mom, about watching a strong woman work herself thin just to keep the lights on, about how she promised herself she'd never be in that position. He listened, really listened, and when she stopped talking, he didn't try to fix her pain. He just looked at her like the version of her standing here, still standing, was the part that mattered most. "You don't drink?" he asked when someone passed by with champagne. "No," she said. "You, not anymore." "Why?" "Didn't like who I was when I stopped feeling things." That line stuck with her, not because it was poetic, but because it was honest. Later, when most of the guests had gone and the rooftop began to quiet, they stayed, still talking, still learning each other's edges. And in that stillness, something shifted. His hand brushed hers, accidentally at first, then not. The silence stretched. He looked at her like he was asking permission without words. And for once, she didn't analyze, didn't calculate, didn't weigh outcomes. She leaned in. He met her halfway. The kiss was slow. Sure, like neither of them were in a rush to escape. She hadn't meant to stay this long. She hadn't meant to enjoy it. But she did. She hadn't meant to want more. But she did. And that was the part that scared her. The air inside the hotel hallway felt too still as she walked beside him. She shouldn't have agreed to come upstairs. They had both stayed on the rooftop long after the tables were cleared and staff had started stacking chairs. Neither had said it out loud, but the quiet between them buzzed with everything they hadn't admitted. A silent invitation, a shift in gravity. She told herself she would only walk him to the elevator. She told herself again when they stepped off on the 9th floor. And when he asked, "You're sure?" Standing in the hallway with one hand on the door, his voice low, his eyes steady, she nodded before she could change her mind. The suite was spacious, modern, not overly luxurious, but clean lines, soft light, no clutter. He offered her water, and she took it. Then silence fell between them again. Not awkward, not forced, just charged. He stood by the window, loosening the last button on his shirt cuff, but not in a way that tried to perform for her. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't asking her to stay. He just waited. She set her glass down and stepped closer. They didn't speak again that night. He kissed her like they had time, like he wasn't in a different state, like she wasn't a woman with too much at stake, and she let herself melt. She let herself feel the weight of his hands at her waist, the way his breath caught when her fingers slid up his back, the quiet reverence in the way he paused, like asking for permission in every movement. He was slow, thoughtful, no rushing, no assumptions. They moved like two people who didn't expect to see each other again, but wanted to make that night mean something. She didn't feel owned. She felt seen. After, they lay in silence, the kind that didn't need fixing. She curled into him, her head on his chest, her hand resting lightly over his heartbeat. She wanted to ask about California, about what he did when he wasn't observing tech panels, about the scar on his shoulder and what kind of man he was before this version. But she didn't. Questions make things real, and she wasn't ready for real. The next thing she remembered was the soft sound of the door closing. She sat up, the sheets cool where his body used to be. The other side of the bed was already made. The suite looked untouched, like he'd cleaned up before leaving. No note, no scribbled number, not even a business card. She blinked slowly. There wasn't heartbreak, just a hollow kind of pause, like the echo of a song you hadn't realized meant something to you until it was gone. She got dressed in silence, didn't cry, didn't rage, just stood in the middle of the room, trying to collect the pieces of a moment she hadn't expected to want to hold on to. It wasn't love. It wasn't even regret. But it wasn't nothing either. The next few hours passed in motion. She returned to her post, oversaw the afternoon keynote, filed final event reports, shook hands, accepted thanks, smiled when someone said, "You look like you slept well." She didn't answer. On the train ride back to Atlanta, she leaned her forehead against the window and tried not to wonder if he had forgotten her already. Weeks later, her roommate commented on how tired she looked. "You're pushing too hard," she said. "Maybe take a break?" Nerea waved her off. She thought it was burnout, stress from wrapping a grant proposal and grading internship reports. But when the nausea kicked in, and her body felt foreign, she knew. 2 tests later, there was no denying it. She was pregnant. She sat on the bathroom floor for almost an hour, not because she didn't know what to do, but because she didn't know how to feel. There was no man to call, no relationship to reevaluate, no heartbreak to confront, just the facts. A new life, her body, her responsibility. When she told her mother, the silence between them stretched too long. "You've always been careful," her mother finally whispered. "You've always been the one I could count on." "I still am," Nerea said quietly. "I raised you to be better than me." "You did. And this doesn't change that." Her mother didn't speak again that night. Nerea made her appointments alone. She stared at the grainy sonogram photos in silence. She adjusted her work schedule, took on remote projects, skipped every party, declined every date. Not that there were many. She didn't chase support, didn't post updates, didn't call old friends. This wasn't a crisis. This was her choice. She never told anyone about the night in Savannah. Not because she was ashamed, but because it wasn't anyone's business how a woman found the strength to move forward when plans shattered. 9 months later, in a dimly lit room at Grady Hospital, Nerea looked into her son's eyes for the first time. He blinked up at her with wide hazel eyes and a tiny furrow in his brow like he already had questions about this world. And she whispered, "I've got you." She didn't need Lennon's name. She didn't need his number. She had Cairo. And that would be enough. Atlanta didn't care that her life had changed. The city still moved at the same speed. Cars blaring past on Peachtree, students filing in, and out of Georgia Tech's labs, cafe lines stretching around the corner for overpriced lattes. Nerea stood in the middle of it all, blending in, unshaken on the outside. But inside, the silence was loud. She had deleted Lennon's number from her call log that morning in Savannah. Not because she didn't want to reach out, but because there was nothing to reach for. She didn't know his last name, no social handle, no company affiliation, just a first name and a memory. A beautiful, sharp memory that stung more the longer it lingered. So she did what she'd always done. She worked. Days became weeks. Weeks melted into months. Nerea threw herself into research deadlines and community programs. She helped inner-city girls learn to code after school. She prepared presentations for medtech funding. She logged hours in the lab on weekends, always the first one in, last one out. Her body, though, refused to follow her schedule. The first sign was the fatigue, then the waves of nausea, the metallic taste, the pounding in her head during early morning lectures. At first, she chalked it up to stress, maybe dehydration, maybe burnout, but deep down, she already knew. The test was confirmation, 2 lines, unblinking, clear, final. She stood in her bathroom, gripping the counter, breathing like someone had stolen the air from the room. This wasn't in the plan. This wasn't in the flowchart. She closed her eyes and counted to 5. And then she opened her calendar. She booked a doctor's appointment under a pseudonym. She didn't want anyone from the university clinic recognizing her. When the ultrasound confirmed she was nearly 8 weeks along, the technician smiled and handed her a printed photo. "Looks like a strong heartbeat." Naraya stared at it. The image looked like static, a blurry, peanut-shaped blur surrounded by black. Strong? Maybe. But she didn't feel strong. Not in that moment. She kept it from her mother for 3 more weeks. They were eating dinner in silence, leftover rice and sautéed kale, when Naraya placed her fork down and said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her mother looked up from her plate, tired eyes studying her daughter's face. "I'm pregnant." The fork slipped from her hand, clattered to the floor. At first, her mother said nothing. Then came the questions. Who is he? Where is he now? Is he helping? Do you love him? Naraya gave her the same answer every time. "I don't know." That answer broke something between them. "I raised you to have a future," her mother said days later. "Not to follow mine. You raised me to be strong. That's what I'm doing. I worked my whole life so you wouldn't have to struggle like I did. And now you're upset that I'm choosing to do it without a man?" Her mother flinched. "That's not what I meant." But it was close enough. The silence between them stretched long into the following weeks. Still, Naraya didn't cry. She researched prenatal vitamins and maternity leave policies like they were final exams. She swapped her usual blazer for looser cardigans, switched coffee for warm ginger tea, slowly declined invitations to lab conferences, blaming fatigue or overlapping deadlines. Only one friend, her colleague Sarai, dared to ask, "You okay?" Naraya paused, then nodded. Just adjusting, that was all she said. At night, she'd lie awake in bed with her hand resting over her stomach. A strange kind of peace crept in. It wasn't that she felt ready. She just knew she wasn't alone anymore. By the time her second trimester rolled in, her belly started to show, small but undeniable. Her mother finally started leaving prenatal brochures on the table without comment. Occasionally she'd bring back soup from her night shift, or ask if Naraya wanted help finding a doula. That was her version of an apology. Naraya accepted it. She wasn't looking for validation. She was building a new rhythm. She began journaling. Each night, she wrote a letter to the baby. Sometimes they were short. "Today, I saw someone with your nose." Other nights, they were long. "I wonder if you'll like the sound of rain." Your dad did. He listened to me talk for hours while it poured over Savannah rooftops. He didn't say much, but I felt safe there. She never signed her name, never addressed the father, just wrote like the child would read it one day when they were old enough to understand everything she didn't say out loud. By month 6, she had outgrown her small room in the house. So she moved. A tiny studio apartment near West Midtown, hardwood floors, second-hand futon, water heater that grumbled every time she turned it on, but it was hers, paid for by her savings and contract work. No roommates, no curfews, no judgment. Her mother didn't visit often, but when she did, she brought folded laundry and too many warnings. "Don't try to prove anything, just raise your child." Naraya nodded, but she never said, "Yes, Ma," because she was doing more than raising a child. She was reclaiming her own life. By her 8th month, she was walking less, napping more, and scrolling through articles, like what to pack for the hospital and choosing a baby name that grows with them. She had a few names on her list, but only one kept rising to the top. Cairo. Not just because it sounded strong, but because it reminded her of something timeless, ancient, enduring, something built to last, against all odds. She had no baby shower, no registry, no Instagram announcement. She didn't feel like a victim. She didn't feel ashamed. She felt steady, and that was enough. It started on a Wednesday. Atlanta was caught in the middle of a late summer storm. Rain smacked against her apartment window like it was trying to be remembered. Naria had spent the afternoon trying to get through an edit of a grant proposal. Her belly stretched under a grey knit dress, feet swollen and propped on a stack of books. At 7:52 p.m., the first contraction came. Sharp, low, deep. It knocked the breath out of her. She didn't scream. She stood, waited, timed it. 12 minutes later, the second one followed. She grabbed her overnight bag from beside the door. She had packed it a week ago. Nothing fancy. A robe, 3 newborn onesies, a folded list of names she still hadn't decided on, and a worn copy of the letter she'd written Cairo in her final trimester. I don't know who you'll be, but I already love you like I've known you all my life. The Uber driver didn't ask questions, just kept glancing in the mirror like he was praying she wouldn't give birth in the back seat. Naria closed her eyes and breathed like the nurse had shown her in the one prenatal class she could afford. In, hold, out, focus. At Grady Memorial, they admitted her within 15 minutes. The room was bright, but not sterile. A nurse named Keisha helped her change into a gown and checked her vitals while asking all the usual questions. No partner coming? No, Naria said. Do you want to list an emergency contact? No. The nurse paused for a second too long, then gently said, You've got this. I'll be right outside. Labor lasted 6 hours. She gripped the rails. She breathed through the pain. She cursed herself, but only once. She didn't cry until the moment she heard him. Tiny, shrill, full of fury. The sound cracked something open in her chest. She turned her head just in time to see him placed in the bassinet, red-faced. Eyes squinted shut, fingers curled tight like he'd arrived with purpose. And in that moment, she whispered, You're real. The nurse brought him to her, wrapped tight, head full of curls, lips already shaped like his father's. Naria blinked back tears and touched the back of his hand. It was warm, alive. So small. He opened his eyes and stared up at her with that same hazel color that had once watched her from a rooftop in Savannah. She let out a shaky breath. Cairo, the name fit. She spent the first night awake, holding him against her chest. The machines beeped softly in the background. The rain hadn't stopped. She watched the sky darken, then slowly shift into morning. Everything about her had changed. She hadn't eaten. Her muscles ached. Her body felt foreign, but her mind was clear. This child wasn't her mistake. He was her reason. Over the next 2 days, Cairo passed all his tests. Healthy lungs, steady heartbeat, no complications. They released her with a stack of discharge papers, a small supply of diapers, and a sleeping baby bundled in a navy blanket too big for his frame. Her mother didn't come, but Naria didn't expect her to. She took a cab home, cradling her son as the driver hit every pothole in the city. Each jolt reminded her that softness had no place in the real world. If she wanted to protect him, she'd have to be harder than the life waiting outside. Her apartment smelled like lavender and old books. She placed Cairo in the bassinet beside her futon, then stood back and just stared. No one clapped. No one brought balloons. No one knocked on the door with congratulations. Still, she smiled, because she had brought life into the world without needing anyone else to give her permission. The first few weeks were a blur. Sleep came in 30-minute shifts. Bottles, burp cloths, late-night cries. Her body healed slowly. She winced every time she stood too fast or reached too far. But every time Cairo gripped her pinky finger, it anchored her. He wasn't demanding, He was observant, eyes always scanning the room, lips pursed like he was deep in thought, even as an infant. Sometimes, when she was changing him, he'd lock eyes with her so intensely. It made her wonder if souls could recognize each other from before birth. She didn't post any photos, didn't send out an announcement. Her inbox filled with messages from colleagues, "Hope all is well," or "Haven't seen you around." But she didn't reply. She was still building her world. And that took everything she had. At 3 weeks, she started working again, remotely. Small contracts, freelance editing, lab write-ups for medical journals. Every dollar mattered. She tracked expenses on a whiteboard, labeled every envelope in her desk drawer. Rent, food, formula, emergency. No room for error, no margin for luxury. But still, no regret. Some nights, when Cairo finally fell asleep, she'd sit in the corner with her notebook and write, "I'm scared too sometimes. Today you smiled, I think. Or maybe it was gas. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying." She didn't know who would ever read those words, but she needed to say them. To someone. Even if it was just the boy curled against her chest. She knew Cairo wouldn't remember these first years. But she would. The long walks in used sneakers pushing a second-hand stroller. The nights she sang him to sleep with lullabies from childhood. The time he laughed, really laughed, when she sneezed too loud during bath time. These were her memories now. Her victories, her proof. And when she looked into his eyes, she didn't think about the man who disappeared. She thought about the woman who stayed, who chose to love without resentment, who gave even when it hurt, who became a mother, without waiting for someone to show up and claim the role of father. She didn't need saving. She had Cairo, and more than that, she had herself. Have you ever had to face something completely life-changing, with no one by your side? Nerea didn't ask for pity. She didn't wait for help. She made a decision, and stood by it. If her strength moved you, if you've ever had to carry the weight of your own choices alone, then this story is for you. Tell us in the comments, have you ever made a decision everyone else questioned, but you knew was right for you? If you're feeling Nerea's journey, tap that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share this with someone who needs a little hope today. Because sometimes, standing alone is the first step to standing strong. The apartment didn't offer much. A twin bed pressed against the far wall. A second-hand desk stacked with unpaid bills and notebooks. A window that looked out onto a brick alley where garbage trucks clanged before sunrise. But Nerea had learned to appreciate the quiet in small places. It meant no one was watching her struggle. That mattered more than space. Cairo slept in a bassinet next to her bed. Most nights, he woke like clockwork, 1:15 a.m., then again at 4. She didn't mind. Sleep had become an unpredictable luxury, but fatigue never frightened her. What scared her was failure. So she kept moving. By the time Cairo was 3 months old, she had built a new rhythm. Her days revolved around feeding schedules, freelance deadlines, and 20 minute windows where Cairo would nap long enough for her to focus. She picked up medical editing gigs, proofread research papers, logged into team calls muted, her webcam off, praying Cairo wouldn't cry mid-meeting. And if he did, she held him close and typed with one hand. No one saw the exhaustion behind the smooth report she submitted on time. No one saw the tears she blinked away after her third rejected invoice, or the silence after job applications went unanswered. But Nerea didn't need applause. She needed progress. Some days she went 12 hours without speaking to another adult, not because she didn't have people she could call, but because she didn't want to explain anything. She didn't want pity, didn't want advice, didn't want a reminder of what she didn't have. She had Cairo, and deadlines, and breath in her lungs. That was enough. Money was always tight. Groceries were planned to the cent. Rent was split between 2 jobs. She stretched diapers, used a coupon app like it was her religion, and every time Cairo grew out of a onesie, she folded it gently and set it aside like a farewell. Not because she was sentimental, but because waste wasn't an option. Her mother called every other Sunday. The conversations were short. How's the baby? Healthy. You still working too hard? I'm surviving. Then there'd be silence, until her mother would sigh and say, "Don't be too proud to ask for help." Naraya never asked, because help came with conditions, and she couldn't afford to feel like a burden. She started journaling again, not letters this time, just thoughts. Things she couldn't say out loud. I don't miss him, but I miss not doing this alone. Some days I feel like I'm vanishing under the weight of responsibility. I'm scared that Cairo will grow up and see how tired I was, not how hard I tried. But then Cairo would laugh, or babble, or wrap his tiny fingers around hers. And the fear would quiet for a little while. Every night, before bed, she cleaned the apartment top to bottom, not because it was dirty, but because it was one thing she could control. She vacuumed with Cairo strapped to her chest. She washed bottles with music playing softly in the background. Jazz, sometimes gospel, never anything loud. Her world was full of motion. Soft, careful motion. It didn't look like a life most people wanted, but it was hers, earned, built in silence. By month 4, Cairo started rolling over on his own. The first time, Naraya gasped out loud, not because it was surprising, but because something inside her needed to witness progress, to see life doing what it does, grow. She took a photo, not for Instagram, just for memory. Then she went back to work. She didn't celebrate her birthday that year. Instead, she made a pot of rice and beans, fed Cairo, wrote a small line in her journal, 25, alone, alive, still moving. Then she turned off the light and rested, because that was her gift to herself. Outside her window, the world kept moving. People dated, traveled, posted filtered versions of their joy. She didn't envy them. She didn't crave the illusion of ease. She craved stability, a future, security for Cairo. So she stayed focused. And every small win, every paid invoice, every night Cairo slept longer, felt like a brick in the foundation she was building. Some mornings, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Not because she looked worse, but because she looked older, sharper, stronger. Still, the girl who once believed in strict plans and linear paths had become a woman who understood that love doesn't always come before the baby. Sometimes it follows after, or never. And that's okay too. Naraya didn't know what the future held. She just knew she wouldn't give up on it. Because she wasn't the kind of woman who disappeared quietly. She was the kind who kept showing up, even when no one clapped. By the time Cairo reached 6 months, Naraya's life had settled into a kind of controlled chaos. It wasn't glamorous or calm, but it was functional, predictable, steady. She woke up before dawn, fed him, changed him, laid him on the small playmat near her desk while she worked. Every morning started the same way. No alarms, just instinct and repetition. The baby didn't cry much anymore. He cooed, reached, explored the edges of the world he was just beginning to understand. And Naraya watched him, half amazed, half wary. How something so small could feel like her entire universe. She hadn't prepared for that. She was finally catching up on rent. A startup based out of Raleigh hired her to consult on a medtech prototype's user testing experience. It wasn't long-term, but it paid more than her editing gigs. And she didn't have to pretend to be less competent than she was. Always a bonus. They'd ask her opinion on workflows, on technical interfaces, on what real families needed in medical tools. And for once, people listened when she spoke. She used the money to get ahead on bills. Bought a compact stroller that didn't rattle over every sidewalk crack. Upgraded from her prepaid phone plan. Even splurged on a thick sweater for Cairo as winter rolled in. It was the first time in a long time she didn't feel like she was treading water. She was building something. There were still hard days, like when Cairo had a fever for 3 straight nights, and she was too afraid to take him to the hospital because her insurance coverage was complicated and her bank balance was $24. Or when she missed an important video call because the power went out during a thunderstorm and her backup hotspot had no data left. Or when her mother texted, out of the blue, "Do you regret keeping him?" She didn't respond, but later that night, she lay awake for hours, Cairo sleeping on her chest, and whispered, "Not even once." She took pride in small things now, like folding laundry before it wrinkled, or finishing her to-do list before noon, or going a full day without snapping at herself. She downloaded an audiobook app and listened while she cleaned. Topics ranged from developmental psychology to startup funding trends. It kept her mind alive. She refused to become one of those women who vanished into motherhood and forgot they once had other dreams too. One afternoon, she opened an email from the Raleigh startup. Subject, contract extension proposal. They wanted to keep her for 6 more months, increase her hours, possibly bring her on as a remote product lead. Naraya blinked at the screen. Her heart didn't leap. It steadied. This was the kind of step forward she had been waiting for. Earned, not gifted. She called Sarai, her only friend left from the lab days. "I think I'm going to be okay," Naraya said. Sarai didn't ask for details. She just said, "I never doubted you." She moved into a new apartment by the time Cairo turned 9 months old. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with better lighting, a working heater, and floors that didn't creak with every step. The windows let in morning light. Cairo's laughter echoed off the clean walls like music. Naraya bought him a bookshelf, stacked it with board books and used titles she remembered from childhood. "Your brain is your biggest tool," she'd whisper while rocking him to sleep. "No one can take that from you." She didn't date, not because she was bitter, but because she was full. Her days were accounted for. Her heart was tethered to something sacred, and she'd already spent enough time repairing what one night broke. She didn't want to hand that kind of power to anyone again. Not casually. Love wasn't off the table. It was just something she'd meet on her own terms, when life allowed space for softness again. Right now, her love went into the small things. Cairo's new milestones, her quiet moments of rest, her growing spreadsheet of ideas for products that could actually help single parents like her. Some nights, after Cairo went down, she'd open her notebook, flip past all the early entries, those raw, tear-stained letters filled with fear and loneliness, and find a fresh page, and write things like, "Today we laughed. Not because anything was funny, just because joy found us. I am not a mistake. He is not a mistake. We are proof that plans don't have to go right to be right." Or, maybe the reason he left was so I could find myself without him. She ran into her old supervisor from Georgia Tech at the pharmacy one afternoon. He barely recognized her. "You look different," he said, more serious. She smiled. "I'm still me. Just more." He offered her a recommendation letter if she ever wanted to return to academia. She thanked him but didn't say yes, because she didn't want to return. She wanted to keep going forward. At 10 months, Cairo stood for the first time. Naraya caught it on her phone. He wobbled for 2 seconds, then plopped down with a loud thud and a confused giggle. She clapped, more excited than she'd felt in years. He looked at her like he didn't understand what all the fuss was about, but he smiled anyway. She sent the video to Sarai, then watched it again and again, not because she needed proof, but because it reminded her of everything she'd built from nothing, brick by brick, night by night, without praise, without promises, only persistence. One morning, while sorting invoices, she came across an old folder labeled Savannah Conference. It was from a backup email she hadn't used in years. Curiosity pulled her in. Inside were notes, scheduled drafts, a roster of confirmed guests. She skimmed, uninterested, until one name stopped her cold. Lennon Dre, guest investor, Monarch Holdings, Kia. Her heart paused. So, there it was. A last name, a company, a trail, She stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering over her keyboard. She could look him up. She could send a message. She could close the loop. But she didn't. Not yet. Because this chapter, this quiet, rising chapter, was hers, and she wasn't ready to let anyone rewrite it. Somewhere between Cairo's first birthday and the third round of client calls in a week, Naraya realized she hadn't cried in almost 4 months. Not once. Not even on Cairo's birthday, when she lit a single candle on a store-bought cupcake and whispered, "We made it, baby." He didn't understand, of course. He'd been too busy trying to smush frosting into the carpet. But she had stood still in that moment, and for the first time since Savannah, she felt light. Not because life had become easy, but because she no longer expected it to be. Her contract with the Raleigh medtech startup had grown into something close to full-time. She still worked remotely, but now she was listed on the team page as product strategy consultant. She attended morning meetings, reviewed wireframes, advised UX researchers on parent-focused design. They sent her a company laptop, a branded hoodie, and a performance bonus. When the money hit her account, Naraya sat at her desk for a long time, hand resting on the trackpad, not moving. This wasn't charity, wasn't help, wasn't someone feeling sorry for her. It was payment for value. Earned, honest, and it made her feel real in a way nothing else had in a long time. Her days had structure now. Wake at 5:30, journal for 5 minutes, stretch, make Cairo's breakfast, check Slack, log deliverables, review strategy documents, send invoices, prepare baby lunch, reply to emails, take Cairo on a walk, power nap if possible. There was no wasted time, no drama, no distractions. Everything had a place. She made a habit of writing affirmations on sticky notes and posting them on her refrigerator. Some stayed for weeks. Some got replaced. But every morning, when she poured oat milk into Cairo's sippy cup, she read one. Today's said, "Peace is better than attention." It reminded her of why she chose solitude when others begged her to put herself back out there. She didn't need attention. She needed alignment. And Cairo deserved a mother who was whole. Her apartment was still small, but she made it feel bigger. She hung soft curtains, bought a second-hand bookshelf, added a cheap but vibrant area rug Cairo loved crawling across. There was a tiny breakfast nook now, where she sipped her tea while planning her week. Her mother hadn't visited in nearly 6 months, but she still called. Sometimes they talked about Cairo's milestones. Sometimes they didn't talk about anything at all, and that was okay. The wound between them hadn't healed completely, but it had stopped bleeding. One Tuesday afternoon, an email popped into her inbox from the company founder. Subject, growth opportunity, investor roundtable meeting. She clicked it. They were preparing to open a new funding round and wanted her to attend the internal prep session for leadership. Would love your strategic insights on what matters most to real users and caregivers, the message read. She reread that line twice. Real users, real caregivers. They saw her as both, and they wanted her voice in the room. That mattered. The call was scheduled for the following week. She marked it on her calendar, checked her Wi-Fi router twice, picked out a blouse that made her feel like she still existed outside of motherhood. Cairo played beside her with wooden blocks as she practiced her intro in the mirror. I'm Naraya. I manage user-focused strategy with an emphasis on family-centered design. It sounded natural. It sounded like a woman who belonged. That Friday, she took Cairo to the park. It was a little tradition she'd started, ending the week with air and sun and stillness. He toddled around on the grass, arms out like a baby bird, face full of joy at nothing in particular. She sat on the bench nearby, sipping water, watching him navigate the wide, open space. Sometimes she wondered if he'd ever ask about his father, about why Naraya never brought anyone home, about what love was supposed to look like. But not today. Today, there were no questions, just sunlight, and wind, and her son's laughter. That night, after putting Cairo to bed, she curled up on the futon and opened a tab she hadn't dared touch in nearly a year. She typed slowly, Lennon Dre plus Monarch Holdings. The search results loaded instantly. There were press releases, conference photos, an article titled, The Investor Who Listens from Tech Digest. She clicked it. There he was. Same face, same eyes. Still dressed like the rules didn't quite apply to him. Still asking good questions. Still moving through the world like it belonged to him. And somehow, he made space for others too. She stared at the screen. Then clicked out. She didn't want answers from him. She wanted clarity in herself. And the truth was, she didn't know how she'd react if she ever saw him again. But she knew this much, he wasn't part of her now. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Monday came. She prepared her notes, dressed Cairo, fed him, set up his playmat beside her desk with puzzles and safe distractions. At 10 a.m. sharp, she logged into the video call. The founder greeted everyone, then introduced the other faces in the room, board members, advisors, and finally, the representative from Monarch Holdings. Joining us from California, we have one of our newest prospective partners, Lennon Dre. Her body went cold. She looked up, and there he was. Naraya's finger hovered for a split second over the leave call button, but she didn't click it. Instead, she inhaled quietly, locked her jaw, and straightened her spine. No reaction. No tells. She wasn't the girl on that rooftop anymore. She was a woman who had earned her seat at this table. Lennon's face on the screen hadn't changed much. Still thoughtful, still understated. The camera framed him in a sunlit office, all clean lines and subtle art. He nodded as the founder spoke, occasionally glancing down to take notes. She wondered if he recognized her. His expression gave nothing away. Neither did hers. The founder continued with the introductions. And on our product strategy team, we have Naraya Lane. She's led user research with a focus on caregiver-centered innovation. Naraya leaned slightly toward her camera. Nice to meet you, Mr. Dre. There was a flicker in Lennon's eyes. Recognition, not immediate. But once it hit, it landed. He tilted his head slightly, his lips parting, only for a second, before he blinked and nodded. Likewise, he said. His voice was smooth, steady, almost too steady. She knew the sound of it, the weight of it, the way it had once pressed gently against her skin in a hotel room at midnight. But that was years ago. She was not that woman anymore. The meeting pressed on. Slide decks. Funding timelines. User behavior metrics. Naraya answered questions. She spoke clearly. She contributed insights about retention strategies and prototype feedback from low-income caregivers. Lennon didn't interrupt her once, but she felt him watching. At the end of the call, the founder closed with, "We're excited about this next phase. Lennon, if you'd like to set up one-on-ones with the team, just let us know." "Absolutely," he replied. "I'd like to schedule a few follow-ups." Naraya's chest tightened. She kept her expression neutral. "Thanks again, everyone," the founder added. "We'll talk soon." The call ended. She closed her laptop slowly, then sat back, staring at the ceiling. Cairo babbled in the corner, shaking a toy. The world hadn't ended. But something had cracked open, and it wasn't going to close easily. Later that evening, she received the calendar invite. Subject, 15-min strategic review from Lennon Dre Time, Thursday 10:30 a.m. Note, would appreciate your perspective. There was no message beyond that. No personal reach, no apology, no reference to the past, just a meeting. She didn't accept it right away. Instead, she opened her notebook, wrote one sentence, "You don't owe anyone your silence." Then she hit accept. The night before the meeting, she couldn't sleep. She kept pacing the apartment, picking up toys, folding laundry, boiling tea she never drank. What would he say? Would he pretend nothing happened? Would he ask about Cairo? Did he already know? She looked at the small photo of her and Cairo tucked into her notebook, his wide smile, her tired eyes. This was her life, not a secret, not something she needed to hide, but not something she owed him either. Thursday came. She wore black, no makeup, hair pulled back, clean, controlled. Cairo stayed with a neighbor for the hour. She needed space to think clearly. At exactly 10:30, she logged in. Lennon was already there, no one else on the call, just them. "Hi," he said. Her name sat unspoken between them. She nodded. "Morning." Silence. Then, "I didn't expect to see you," he said quietly. "That makes two of us." He looked down for a moment, then back up. "You look, well," she kept her tone measured. "I'm focused. That helps." A pause. He took a breath. "I tried to find you. You didn't know my last name," she said. "That's what you told me." "I didn't," he said. "But I remembered everything else." "Memory doesn't raise a child," she replied. His eyes softened, but she didn't give him space to speak. "We're not here for that," she said. "This is a strategy review, so let's talk product." He blinked, then nodded. "Business." "Fine." They discussed caregiver onboarding, friction points in the app interface, segment retention between first-time and long-term users. She was sharp, calm, professional. She gave him nothing personal, and he didn't ask. But something hung in the pauses, in the way he didn't interrupt, in the way his voice lowered when saying her name. She felt it, but she didn't lean into it. She couldn't, not yet. The meeting ended with a plan to follow up in 2 weeks. He didn't push for more time, didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. But before he clicked off, he hesitated, then said, "You were always the most focused person in the room. That hasn't changed." She looked straight at him. "And you still leave without warning." His jaw tensed. Then the screen went black. She sat back, closed the laptop. Her fingers trembled, but her spine didn't. He was back, but she wasn't chasing anything. Not love. Not closure. Not a man who left before morning. Outside, Cairo's laughter echoed from the hallway as her neighbor brought him back in. He ran to her. She picked him up and held him close, burying her face in his curls. This was real, and it was hers. For 2 weeks, there was nothing. No calls, no unexpected messages, no forced conversations, just time. Work. Cairo. It was almost easy to believe the call with Lennon had never happened. Naraya fell back into rhythm. Morning meetings, nap schedules, nighttime reports. The startup's funding round moved forward. She was asked to prepare a UX research deck for external investors. The founder even floated the idea of bringing her on as a permanent remote strategist. "I'll think about it," she said. But she already knew she'd say yes. The job gave her more than income. It gave her identity. On Thursday afternoon, she opened her inbox and saw a new message. From Lennon Dre, subject, "Feedback notes message. Appreciated your thoughts on the last review. Would like to talk through 2 user flow suggestions before next week's demo. Let me know if you're available." L. She read it twice. It was short, direct, no emotion, no hint of the past. She could ignore it, but that would be unprofessional, and Naraya never mixed silence with avoidance. So she replied, "Available Friday, 10 a.m., calendar link attached." The next morning, she dressed in her usual home uniform, clean shirt, tidy bun, no distractions. Cairo was with the neighbor again, playing with blocks and giggling at cartoons. She kept her camera off. Lennon didn't mention it. They discussed 2 onboarding paths for new users, talked A/B testing language, reviewed how caregivers engaged with task reminders. It was smooth, easy, almost like nothing had ever happened between them, almost. Until the end of the call. He lingered again. just like last time. "Naraya," he said. She didn't answer right away. "I know this isn't the space for personal conversations. I respect your distance." She waited. "But when you're ready, if ever, you can talk to me. Not as an investor, just as me." Her mouth opened, closed. Then she said, "You had your chance to talk to me when I woke up alone in a hotel suite." He looked down. "I didn't leave to hurt you. But you did." He nodded once. "I did." Then the call ended. That weekend, she took Cairo to a local library's reading hour. It had become a little ritual, an escape from the digital world, a reminder of soft pages and voices that didn't rush. Cairo sat cross-legged beside her, clapping along with the other toddlers. His face lit up with each new story. His joy was simple, undemanding. Afterward, they walked through the park behind the library. He tugged on her finger with his tiny hand, pointing to birds and picking leaves. The world was big to him. And somehow, in his eyes, it became big to her too. Later that night, after Cairo was asleep, she sat on the couch with a warm cup of tea and let herself think about Lennon. Really think. Not as a ghost from her past. Not as the man who left, but as the man who was now knocking, quietly, carefully, on a door she had long since closed. She didn't know what he wanted. She didn't know if he deserved answers. But what she did know was this: she hadn't survived to give anyone else the pen to write her story. If he was back, he would meet her now, not who she was then. On Monday, Lennon emailed again. A simple subject line, "Quick check-in?" She ignored it for 3 days, then replied, "Send agenda first. I don't do unstructured meetings." He sent it. She read it, and once again scheduled the call. The meeting was professional, but this time he kept glancing at her through the screen, like he was memorizing her again. "You built a whole life," he said near the end. "I did," she answered, "because I had to." He nodded. "I missed the start of it, but I don't want to miss the rest." Her voice stayed calm. "That's not your decision to make." He looked down, then back up. "Would you tell me his name?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Why?" "Because I think about him. Even when I didn't know he existed, I think a part of me knew that night meant something more." Naraya closed her laptop. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. That evening, she stood at her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Cairo was asleep again, his favorite stuffed animal tucked beneath his arm. She whispered into the quiet, "You have me. That's enough." But deep inside, something flickered too. Not weakness, not longing, just curiosity. Not about whether Lennon could be part of their future, but whether she was ready to let him understand her past. Saturday came with rain, not the angry kind, but the kind that just lingered, soft, steady, soaking the sidewalks until the city moved a little slower. Naraya liked days like this. It made staying in feel like a choice, not a restriction. She spent the morning with Cairo on the floor, stacking blocks and flipping through picture books. He had a new favorite word now, up, which he used for everything from toys to food to sudden toddler requests for hugs. "Up, Mama," he said with both hands out. She picked him up, kissed his cheek. Always. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. She hesitated, then picked up. "Naraya." "Lennon." She said nothing. "I'm sorry for calling like this. I didn't want to email again. I'm in Atlanta. For meetings." Still, she said nothing. He continued, "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know, in case, if you felt like talking." There was a pause. "I'm not asking for the past," he said. "I'd just like to understand who you became after I left." Her breath caught, but only for a second. Then she said, "There's nothing to talk about." Click. She ended the call. He didn't call again, but the next morning, as she pushed Cairo in his stroller through the park, she saw something that made her stop mid-step. A stack of hardcover children's books, wrapped in a clear, waterproof tote, sat on the bench where she always paused. The tag on it was handwritten, "For Cairo, from a friend who listens." Her chest tightened. She looked around. No one in sight. No cameras. No message beyond that. She knelt, checked the books. Titles about science, adventure, family. All new. All carefully chosen. Cairo clapped when she placed one in his lap. "Up!" he shouted, not understanding why his mother's hands were trembling slightly. She picked him up and whispered, "It's just a gift." But inside, something pulled. That evening, she didn't journal. She just sat at her desk, staring at the bag of books now resting on the shelf. He remembered the name. He paid attention. Still, she wasn't sure what that meant. Intentions didn't change history, but they could shape the present if she let them. On Monday, he emailed again. Subject: "Thank you for reading the notes last week." No reference to the gift. No follow-up on the call, just a quiet acknowledgement that they were still orbiting the same space. She replied with a bullet point list of design feedback. No greeting, no signature. Professional, but not cold. That week, she found herself watching Cairo more carefully. He was becoming more expressive, imitating voices, stacking objects in color groups, learning to say no with fierce certainty. He had Lennon's intensity, the same quiet calculation behind the eyes, the same way of observing everything before reacting. But he had her fire too, her grit, her steadiness, her ability to survive. And that made her proud. One night, after Cairo fell asleep, she sat on the balcony, wrapped in an old throw blanket, rain misting against the railing. She thought about how different her life was now. No parties, no rest days, no hand to hold when exhaustion pressed too hard. But also, no regrets, because she had chosen this, and even though she was tired, she was whole. Still, the books, the call, the tone in Lennon's voice, it stirred something. Not longing, not romance, but grief. The kind that catches you sideways years later and makes you mourn not a person, but what they took when they walked away. He had left without knowing. She had stayed and carried everything. The weight, the fear, the love. And now he was back, softly, cautiously. And she didn't know if she was angry or simply afraid that some part of her still remembered what it felt like to be wanted. The next day, Lennon messaged her again. Subject: "No reply needed. Body: "Thank you for everything you've done for the team. I'll be stepping back from direct calls. After this quarter, just wanted to say, your voice matters. And I hope, one day, I can earn the right to hear it fully." She read it twice, then closed the tab. Not because she was shutting him out, but because she needed to feel her own heartbeat in silence again before deciding what to say. Cairo stirred in his sleep. She walked over, kissed his forehead, sat beside his bed. She opened her notebook and wrote, "There is strength in showing up, even when you don't knock." The office building was more modern than Naria expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, neutral tones, hardwood floors that didn't creak, the kind of place designed to feel like possibility. Clean lines and clean slates. It wasn't her usual setting. She worked remotely 90% of the time, but today the team had called for a roundtable. The startup was moving into its growth phase, and with investment partners flying in, the founder insisted all core contributors attend. She had almost declined. Then she saw Lennon's name on the email CC line, and chose not to run. She wore a deep blue blazer, black slacks and simple earrings. Her curls were pulled into a low puff, and her lips were tinted a soft brown. Polished, quiet power, not for him, for herself. She left Cairo with Sarai, who'd come over early with puzzles, snacks, and a warning. "Breathe," Sarai said, as Naraya grabbed her laptop bag. "I am breathing, not like someone sprinting into a fire." Naraya only smiled. She entered the room 5 minutes early. 3 people sat around the table. Product lead, marketing rep, the founder, and then him. Lennon stood, when she walked in. She didn't miss the way his eyes moved, down her arms, over her face, stopping briefly at her mouth. She nodded. "Morning." "Hey," he said, softer than necessary. She didn't offer more. Didn't need to. They got to business. Revenue projections, user engagement metrics, launch timelines. The room buzzed with charts and deadlines and strategy pivots. Nerea took notes, offered insights, kept her comments sharp and clean. Lennon spoke only when needed, measured, focused. But every time she looked up, he was already watching her. And not in the way that distracted her, in the way that made her remember. That he had once known her laugh, that he had once kissed her like time didn't exist. That he had once left without saying goodbye. After an hour, the founder suggested a short break. Coffee, water, fresh air. Nerea stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched out before her, hazy, humid, pulsing. She leaned on the railing and closed her eyes for one breath. One. And when she opened them, she wasn't surprised to hear footsteps behind her. "You still like rooftops," Lennon said. She didn't turn around. "You still leave too soon," she said back. He paused, then moved beside her. They stood in silence for a beat. Then, "I didn't know how to stay. You didn't even try. I was scared," he admitted. "Of what?" "Me? No. Of feeling like something mattered again." She looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't the polished man from the magazine covers. He looked tired, like someone who had lived long days and quiet regrets. "That's not a reason," she said. "That's an excuse." "I know. You built something beautiful," he said. "I saw it before I even knew the truth." She didn't ask what truth. He continued, "Your leadership, your clarity." I kept thinking, who is this woman who holds space like that? And then I realized I'd already met her. "You'd left her," he nodded slowly. "And I live with that." Silence again. He didn't move closer. She didn't lean away. The air between them felt stretched, not tense, not angry, just full, like everything unsaid was vibrating between them. He finally said, "You don't owe me anything. Not a conversation, not time, not forgiveness." "Good," she said. Still, he added, "If one day you ever feel like talking, about him, about us, I'll be here. Not pushing, just present." She didn't answer, didn't look at him, just said, "I have a meeting in 10 minutes, and walked back inside. But as she sat down and reopened her laptop, she felt his presence behind her, steady, not demanding, and somehow, for the first time in years, she didn't hate the feeling. The next day came without fanfare, no texts, no emails, no surprise calls from unknown numbers. Nerea went back to her home routine. Cairo tugged at her pajama leg while she stirred oats in a pan. She wiped his chin clean between spoons of banana mash and water breaks. By 8 a.m., she had already submitted 1 deliverable and answered 2 client questions in Slack. She didn't think of Lennon until Cairo pointed to the stack of books still sitting near the living room shelf. "Book," she blinked. "That's right, baby." She picked up one. Ada Twist, Scientist. The one with the gold foil edges and a handwritten dedication inside. To Cairo, always ask why. From someone who did, and wished he asked sooner. That afternoon, she found an envelope tucked in her mailbox. No name on the outside. Inside was a slim card. A gift card to Little Luminaries, a local learning store known for its Montessori tools and educational toys. $150. Attached was a note, in familiar handwriting. "Not trying to earn anything. Just want to contribute to the curiosity you created." She closed her eyes and leaned against the front door. No name, no expectations, just a quiet attempt to be part of something. From the sidelines, she didn't use it right away. Instead, she left the envelope on her desk, unopened, visible, but untouched, like everything else between them. By Wednesday, she was buried in a UX sprint. Back-to-back calls. 2 missed emails. A sick teammate. A client pushing back on their timeline. Cairo was clingy, sensing her stress, and refused to nap more than 20 minutes at a time. She was fraying, tired, irritable, running low. And then the doorbell rang. She opened it to find a paper bag sitting on the welcome mat. No knock, no footsteps, just silence and the smell of roasted vegetables and garlic. Inside the bag, takeout from her favorite vegan spot. 2 bowls, 1 child-sized portion, a note scribbled in black ink on the receipt. You once told me you hated cooking on hard days. I listened. She stared at the food, not because she was suspicious, but because something about it was too gentle, and she wasn't used to gentle. She fed Cairo first. He devoured the sweet potato rice bowl like it was a feast. She sat across from him, quietly eating. For the first time that week, she didn't feel like her body was dragging behind her mind. The food was warm. The apartment was still. Her son was full and giggling. And she felt held, even if just for a moment. Still, she didn't reach out. She didn't send a thank you, didn't ask how he knew, didn't open the door and invite anything further. Because consistency meant more than gestures, and if Lennon was serious about showing up, he would keep showing up, even without applause. Friday came, and with it, another message. Subject, no agenda, from Lennon Body. No meetings today. Just wanted to say, I respect the space you need. I don't want to replace what you've built. I just want to understand what it cost you to build it. That's all. I'll be at the park tomorrow, 10 a.m., same bench. I won't wait long, but I will be there. She read it. Closed it. Read it again later. Then moved on. Saturday morning was warm. Slight breeze. Cairo was already up and bouncing around the apartment with a piece of toast in his hand and applesauce on his onesie. She hadn't planned to go anywhere, but Cairo pulled at the door. Mama Park. She hesitated, checked the time. 9:42 a.m. She sighed, grabbed the diaper bag, and wiped applesauce from his cheek. All right, just a walk. She didn't go straight to the bench. She walked the long way, past the fountain, the climbing area, the rows of stroller moms gossiping about preschool sign-ups. Then she saw it. Lennon, sitting on the same bench as last time, a paper cup in hand. No phone out, no watch checking, just waiting. Not anxiously, not performatively. Just there. She almost turned around. But Cairo squealed and ran toward the open space in front of the bench. And that sealed it. Lennon stood when he saw them. But he didn't speak, didn't move closer. Naraya met his eyes and said plainly, "We're not here for a reunion." "Understood," he replied. She sat on the far side of the bench. Cairo plopped onto the grass and started picking dandelions. Lennon sat again, hands folded, elbows on knees. "I didn't know he existed," he said. "I believe you," she replied, still watching her son. "I don't expect access." She nodded. "Good, because you're not getting it. Not yet." His throat moved. "I was a coward," he said. "You were gone. I kept looking after that weekend. I asked a few people. No one had your last name. I came back to that hotel 6 months later and asked about guest records. Nothing." She stayed silent. "I didn't stop thinking about you. You moved on fast enough." He looked at her, pained. "I didn't. I just buried it." "Well," she said flatly, "I didn't get that luxury." They sat in silence for another minute. Then Lennon said, "You did an amazing thing." She looked down, her voice low. "No, I did the right thing, the hard thing, the lonely thing. But don't dress it up." He nodded. "I won't." Cairo toddled up to them with 2 flowers in hand. He gave one to Naraya, smiling wide. Then, without prompt, he extended the second one to Lennon. Lennon froze. He didn't look at Naraya. He just accepted the flower with trembling fingers and whispered, "Thank you." Naraya stood. "We're done here." Lennon didn't argue. He stood too. "Thank you for not walking away." She didn't respond. But she didn't walk fast either. And Lennon stood there, holding that small flower like it meant more than anything he'd ever been given. Have you ever faced someone who left you and realized you're no longer the same person they once knew? Neraya didn't crumble when Lennon returned. She stood tall in the life she built alone. Tell us in the comments, would you let someone back in after they disappeared? Or do some doors stay closed for good? If you're feeling Neraya's strength, hit that like button. Share your thoughts. Your voice matters here. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us, love must be earned, not assumed. Because sometimes the real test isn't walking away, it's knowing when not to open the door. The next time Lennon appeared, he didn't say a word. It was a Tuesday. Rain tapped lightly on the apartment windows, and Neraya had just finished folding laundry when her phone buzzed with a text from Sarai. "There's a man at the daycare front desk. Says he knows Cairo's mom. Didn't ask to pick him up. Just dropped off a care package." Didn't stay. Neraya stared at the screen. No follow-up text from him. No email. No call. When she picked up Cairo an hour later, the director handed her a small brown paper bag. Inside, a new pack of art markers, a toddler STEM workbook, and a thermos with warm lentil soup. No note, no explanation, just presence. Quiet, intentional, unannounced. She didn't text him. She didn't thank him. But she didn't throw anything away either. Over the next 2 weeks, he didn't push. He didn't try to schedule another meeting. Didn't hover, didn't knock. But every Thursday morning, a new book showed up at the apartment doorstep. Wrapped, clean, thoughtful. Titles like My Daddy Builds Robots and Questions for Curious Kids. No name. Just an envelope tucked inside each one, with Cairo's name written in bold block letters. Inside, a hand-drawn maze, or a simple puzzle sheet, or a letter that always started with the same 3 words, "If you want," and ended with, "I'd like to learn from you." Neraya read them all. She never told Cairo who they were from, but she kept each one in a small file folder beneath her desk. Labeled simply, he tried. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation, but it was a start. And Neraya, as much as she hated to admit it, respected effort that wasn't performative. On a Friday, after a rough work week and a teething baby, she opened her laptop and saw an email from the startup's founder. Subject, Community Showcase Invite. Neraya had been nominated to speak on a virtual panel for women in tech, focused on balancing parenting with leadership in product strategy. She almost said no, but Cairo was asleep, and the apartment was quiet, and something inside her whispered, "Let them see what building alone looks like." So she agreed. On the day of the panel, she wore a soft cream blouse, lips glossed, edges brushed. She didn't dress up often, but when she did, it meant something. The panel started. 2 other speakers joined. Then the moderator introduced her. "This is Neraya Lane, product strategist, single mom, and voice for end-user dignity in medical tech." She spoke for 20 minutes, not about hardship, not about struggle, but about clarity, purpose, the power of boundaries. She told the audience, "The biggest lesson I've learned is this: silence can be self-respect. You don't have to defend your strength, just live it." The chat lit up with claps and fire emojis. She signed off with a quiet smile. Cairo clapped beside her, thinking she was on a cartoon. And Neraya, tired, proud, steady, bent down, kissed his forehead and whispered, "We keep showing up." 2 hours later, she received a message on her work phone. From Lennon, no subject. "I watched your panel. You were exactly who I thought you'd become. Strong, unshakable. Thank you for letting me see it, even from a distance." She didn't reply. But she didn't delete it either. The next Saturday, Cairo's daycare hosted a family robotics showcase, an event for parents and kids to explore simple STEM activities. Neraya almost didn't go. She had 2 deadlines. The weather was cold. and Cairo had been cranky all morning. But something in his eyes, wide, eager, nudged her. They went. The center was packed. Tables with Lego towers, basic circuits, spinning cardboard motors powered by AA batteries. Parents hovered. Kids squealed. Cairo ran to a corner table and started stacking colored blocks, building a crooked tower with intense focus. Naraya stood nearby, watching with her arms folded. Then she felt it. A stillness, a presence. She turned her head. Lennon stood across the room, not moving, not approaching. Just there. He wore jeans and a dark sweater, hands in his pockets. A lanyard around his neck with a visitor badge. He wasn't trying to blend. He wasn't pretending. He was witnessing. Her, Cairo, the life they had. And he didn't ask to be part of it. When the showcase ended, Cairo tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, juice?" She turned toward the snack table, reached for a small paper cup. When she turned back, Lennon was crouched on the floor, just outside the play area, not speaking, just smiling at Cairo. And Cairo, without prompting, walked toward him, not into his arms, not with recognition, but with interest. "Hi," he said. Lennon smiled. "Hey, little man." Cairo showed him the yellow gear in his hand. "It spins," he whispered. Lennon nodded. "That's a great one." Then Cairo turned and ran back to the snack table, attention gone. Lennon stood, met Naraya's eyes. "I wasn't sure I should come. You didn't overstep." "I never want to again." She nodded once, then said, "Thank you for letting it be about him, not you." He nodded too. "That's the only way I know how now." Later that night, she tucked Cairo into bed, then sat by her desk and opened her folder. She added one more note to the stack. He showed up, quietly. That matters. The night after the showcase, Naraya barely slept. Not because she was upset, not because Lennon had crossed a line, but because he hadn't. He had shown up, stood back, and said little. And yet, somehow, he'd said everything. She sat at her desk past midnight, Cairo snoring gently across the room. Her inbox was full, but her focus wasn't on work. It was on one question that had lived under her skin for 4 years. Why did he disappear? She'd buried it under diapers and deadlines, hidden it beneath Cairo's lullabies and investor presentations. But tonight, it rose up again. Because now, Lennon was close enough to answer it. If she let him. The next morning, she sent a message. Subject, 1 hour I'm free Wednesday at 6. If you want to talk, just talk. You can come by. It's not a reunion. Don't mistake it for anything more. He replied in less than 10 minutes. Thank you. I'll be there. Wednesday came fast. She cleaned, not because she wanted to impress him, but because clutter made her uneasy when her emotions weren't sorted. She cooked early, fed Cairo, bathed him, got him into his favorite cotton pajamas with little rocket ships printed on the sleeves. By 5:58, Cairo was building towers on the rug, while Naraya stood by the window, arms folded. At 6 on the dot, there was a knock. She didn't move right away. Then she opened the door. Lennon stood there in a black jacket and grey slacks, no briefcase, no phone in hand. Just him. He looked her in the eye. "Hi." She stepped aside. "Shoes off," she said flatly. He kicked them off and followed her in. She offered him water, nothing more. He took it. They sat across from each other, her on the armchair, him on the edge of the couch. Cairo stayed between them on the floor, babbling to his blocks. Naraya didn't say anything at first. She wanted to see what he would do with the silence. Lennon leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I should have stayed that night," he said. "You did more than leave," she replied. "You vanished." "I was afraid," he said. "Everyone is. That's not a reason." "No, it's not." He looked at Cairo. "He's amazing." Naraya's eyes stayed fixed. "You missed the hardest part," she said. "You missed the colic, the sleepless nights, the first fevers. You missed his first word. You missed me drowning in choices. So you don't get to comment. He nodded, taking it. That's fair. She studied him. You have 5 minutes. Start at the beginning. Lennon leaned back, running a hand down his face. I went to that summit because I'd just come off a 3-year burnout. I was investing in everything and nothing. Money was good, but I was empty. I wanted to feel something real. She said nothing. I met you. You were the only person there not trying to prove something. You talked like your life depended on it, like your voice had weight. Because it did. He nodded. I know that now. When I woke up, I panicked, he said. Not because I didn't feel something, but because I did. And I wasn't ready. She raised a brow. Ready for what? Fatherhood? No. Ready to be accountable to someone again. She paused. Again? He hesitated. I was engaged once, years back. She left after I missed one too many anniversaries, one too many calls. I told myself love was a distraction. After that, I kept everything surface level. Until you... Naraya's throat tightened, but she swallowed it down. So I was an accident. You were a wake-up call. Too bad you hit snooze. He smiled. It was faint. Sad. I know I lost the right to ask for anything. But I want to say this. Watching you raise him without bitterness, that changed something in me. She finally looked him in the eyes. Do you regret it? Every day, he said. But not because I feel guilty, because I missed the chance to know the best part of me. That landed deeper than she expected. She shifted slightly, arms crossing tighter. You say all the right things. I'm not trying to be right, he said. I'm trying to be honest. Cairo climbed into her lap. She held him instinctively, kissing the top of his curls. He doesn't know you, she said, and he's not a project you get to visit for personal growth. I know. I don't want your money. I don't want your pity. And I definitely don't want your timeline. I don't have one, he said. I'm not here to fix. I'm here to follow. Silence. Then Naraya stood, balancing Cairo on her hip. I'll let you walk us to the door, she said. That's it. He rose slowly. As they stepped out, she reached for the doorframe, but paused, then said, He likes puzzles. And he's got your stubbornness. Lennon blinked, then smiled. I'll remember that. She closed the door, didn't lock it, but didn't open it again either. Inside, she leaned against the wall and let herself breathe, not because she was hopeful, but because, for the first time, her past had looked her in the eye and didn't flinch, and neither did she. The first time Lennon joined them again, it was public, a quiet Sunday morning at the park. No cameras, no eyes, just trees whispering in the wind and toddlers stumbling through grass. Naraya sat on a bench, legs crossed, her eyes locked on Cairo as he chased a foam ball a few feet ahead. Lennon showed up with no fanfare, no bouquet, no apologies. Just 2 coffees in hand and a small box wrapped in blue paper with a silver ribbon. She gave him a wary look. It's a build-it-yourself windmill, he explained, offering the coffee. Solar-powered. She took the drink. That doesn't mean I trust you. I wouldn't expect it to. Cairo noticed him after a few minutes. He walked over, grinning, his little legs moving fast. He didn't remember Lennon's name, not yet, but he remembered kindness. The gift held his attention. They sat together on the grass, Lennon holding pieces, Cairo pretending to fix things with his toy wrench. Naraya stayed close, but didn't hover. It wasn't smooth. Cairo got distracted. Lennon fumbled the instructions. But he didn't rush. He didn't overcompensate. He stayed calm, present. By the end of the hour, they had a half-built windmill, a juice spill on Lennon's jeans, and a boy too tired to walk home. Naraya picked Cairo up. He doesn't nap for long after park days, she said. Lennon nodded. If you ever want help with building kits or science stuff, I'd love to contribute. No pressure. She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. The next time he showed up, it was Wednesday afternoon. He waited outside the daycare at pickup. Naraya saw him through the glass doors. Her first instinct was to tense. But then she noticed the book bag in his hands, Cairo's, left behind the day before. "I figured I'd drop it off," he said. "Thank you," she said. Then, without thinking, "You free Friday?" He blinked. "Yes. There's a library program at 11, STEM story hour. I'll be there." She walked past him. Still no promises. Still no warmth. But the door, this time, didn't slam behind her. Friday came, and Lennon was early. Cairo wore his favorite overalls and gripped his snack cup like it was treasure. The library room was full of toddlers, oversized beanbags, and patient librarians reading books about gears, machines, and how things work. Cairo sat between Naria and Lennon, one hand on each knee. He didn't speak much, but he looked up at both of them with a peace Naria hadn't expected. It wasn't confusion, it was comfort. Afterward, Lennon helped pack up their things. As they walked toward the parking lot, he asked, "Do you want to grab lunch?" Naria shook her head. "Not yet." "Understood. But you can walk us to the car." He nodded, and he did. Always outside. Always during Cairo's active hours. No overnight bags. No solo time. No confusion. Lennon never brought up the past. Never asked for more. He just showed up. Sometimes with learning kits. Sometimes with fruit cups. Sometimes with nothing but a quiet smile and a willingness to listen. One Saturday, Naria found herself watching them from the edge of the playground. Cairo had just finished building a small structure with wooden planks, and Lennon was crouched beside him, cheering him on without exaggeration, correcting gently when needed. "You got it," Lennon said. "That's called balance." Naria couldn't help herself. She whispered, "He's learning that from me." Lennon looked over. "Of course he is." There was no smugness in his voice. Just respect. Later that evening, Naria sat on her bed with a cup of tea and her journal in her lap. She wrote, "He's not asking for forgiveness. He's asking to learn. And part of me wants to teach him." She stared at the sentence, then closed the book. Sunday afternoon, while Cairo napped, Lennon sent a photo. It was of the windmill, fully built. "Finally figured out where the gear was catching. Took me longer than it should have. Thought you might want to show him." She didn't reply, but she saved the image. And when Cairo woke up, she showed it to him. "Remember that?" she asked. Cairo nodded, tapping the screen. "Wind." She smiled. "Yeah, baby. Wind." She didn't tell Lennon that she'd started keeping his photos in a private folder labeled for later. She didn't tell herself what later meant, but it was there. And that said enough. The invitation wasn't spoken. It was typed. "You can come by Saturday afternoon, 2 to 4 p.m. No expectations. Cairo's nap ends by then. I'll be home." There were no emojis. No "see you then." No warmth. But it was the first time Naria allowed Lennon into their world on her terms, in her space. That mattered. Saturday arrived quiet and overcast. The apartment smelled of cinnamon and books. Naria had cleaned earlier, not for him, but for her own peace. She didn't believe in showing up for someone else without first showing up for yourself. Cairo was already awake from his nap, chewing on apple slices and dragging around a blanket like a cape. She glanced at the clock. 1:59. There was a knock. Soft. 3 taps. She opened the door. Lennon stood there holding a puzzle box, his other hand in his jacket pocket. He didn't try to step in immediately. She moved aside. Shoes off. He smiled. "Of course." Cairo spotted him instantly. "Hi," he said, running forward. Lennon crouched. "Hey, buddy, I brought something we can build together." "Puzzle." Cairo grinned. Naria watched the exchange closely. No hug attempts. No forced excitement. Just Lennon matching Cairo's energy, patiently opening the box on the living room rug and explaining each piece before they started. She sat nearby with a book, not reading it, just holding space. It wasn't quiet. Cairo asked 100 questions, knocked puzzle pieces under the couch, giggled every time Lennon got a piece wrong. "You upside." Cairo laughed. You're right, Lennon said. That was totally upside down. It was domestic, soft, uneventful. And that's what unsettled Naraya most, how easy it felt. At 3:30, she called for a break. Snack time. Cairo ran to the kitchen stool. Lennon stood and stretched. You want something too? She asked, before she could stop herself. He blinked. If you're offering, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't. She poured juice for Cairo, water for Lennon, set out crackers, fruit slices, and a few pretzels. They sat, Naraya and Lennon across the table, Cairo in the middle, jabbering about clouds and blocks and a made-up dinosaur named Snackosaurus. Lennon listened. Naraya observed, and somewhere between Cairo offering Lennon a grape and Naraya sipping her tea in silence, a fragile sense of rhythm settled between them. Not family. Not yet. But function. After snack, Cairo wandered back to the living room to build a tower out of books. Lennon leaned back in his chair. Thank you, he said. For the grapes? For letting me see what you've built. It's more than I ever imagined. She met his eyes. I didn't build it for you to see. I built it because I had no other choice. I know. They sat quietly. Then Naraya said, Cairo doesn't call you anything yet. I know, Lennon said again, and I don't expect him to. She looked down at her mug. If he ever asks, I'll tell him the truth, that I met someone once, that we weren't ready, that I raised him, that you came back. I can live with that, Lennon replied. You'll have to. When it was time to leave, Cairo hugged Lennon's leg, unprompted. Bye-bye, he said. Lennon bent low, steady. Bye, little man. I'll see you soon, okay? Cairo nodded, running off toward his toy corner. Lennon turned to Naraya at the door. She didn't step aside. You can come next Saturday. Same time. He blinked once. Thank you. She didn't answer. She just closed the door gently after him. That night, Naraya opened her journal and wrote, He came in quietly. He left respectfully. That matters more than anything else right now. She paused, then added, Still not forgiveness, but something lives in the space between silence and trust. The next Saturday came, then the one after that. He came with different kits, tiny DIY volcanoes, a cardboard telescope, a storybook about stars. Each visit was timed. Cairo never left his sight. Naraya never left the room. But slowly, walls lowered. Cairo began asking for Lennon Day. Lennon learned Cairo's favorite color changed weekly. Naraya started letting the visits run 5-10 minutes longer. Nothing forced, nothing fast, just presence. 3 visits in, Lennon brought a framed photo. It was of Cairo building his windmill, taken during their first real afternoon together. He didn't ask to hang it. He just said, if you want it, no pressure. Naraya stared at the image. Her son, focused, his mouth open mid-laugh, curls wild, light pouring through the trees. She placed it on the shelf beside her work desk, without a word. She never told Lennon that some nights, when Cairo was asleep and the apartment was still, she stood in front of that photo and whispered, He's yours too. But you don't get to claim him. You get to earn him. And slowly. Lennon was. It started with a text. Cairo's birthday is next month, right? Would it be okay if I came? I understand if not. Just thought I'd ask. There were no follow-ups. No guilt. Just that message sitting quietly in her inbox like a pebble in her shoe. Naraya stared at it for an hour, then ignored it for a day. Then reread it the next night after Cairo fell asleep, cheeks sticky with syrup from pancake night. Could he come? That was the real question. Not whether he wanted to, not whether he deserved to, but whether Cairo would benefit from having his father present, or whether it would shake the safe foundation Naraya had built from scratch. She curled up on her couch, blanket wrapped around her knees, TV on mute, and let the question simmer. Lennon had been consistent. Every Saturday for 5 weeks he showed up on time. never missed, never overstepped, never demanded more than was offered. He didn't bring gifts for her, didn't fish for compliments, didn't force titles like Dad. But Cairo was changing. He mentioned Lennon in passing now. Lennon said stars don't twinkle in space, or can Lennon come next Saturday too? That name was no longer a stranger in Cairo's mouth, and that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She finally replied on a Thursday night. It'll just be me, Cairo, and 2 of his little friends. I'll let you know. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. 3 days before the birthday, Naraya stood at the bakery counter. Chocolate cake, right? The clerk asked. Right, Naraya said, then hesitated. Actually, can you write, Happy 3rd birthday, Cairo. We love you? The words slipped out. We. Her voice nearly cracked saying it. She paid quickly and left, unsure whether the we meant Cairo and her, or her and Lennon. The morning of the birthday, Naraya stood in the living room adjusting balloons and streamers. The apartment looked brighter than usual. Sunlight spilled through the windows, catching the soft pinks, greens and blues in Cairo's birthday theme, dinosaurs in party hats. Cairo was giggling with his 2 little friends, Mina and Caden, as they threw soft plush toys at each other in a game only toddlers understood. At 1 p.m. sharp, there was a knock. Lennon stood on the other side, holding a modest-sized gift bag and a smile that said he wasn't sure if he should be smiling. Naraya opened the door, breathing out. You're here, she said. You said, maybe. I took a chance. Come in, she whispered. He didn't rush to Cairo. He took off his shoes, greeted Mina and Caden with a polite wave, and waited until Cairo noticed. Cairo did. Lennon. He shouted, running over. I'm 3, I heard, little man. Happy birthday. You see my cake? And my balloons? And I have dinosaur socks. Lennon knelt to eye level. That's amazing. Do they roar when you walk? No, Cairo giggled. But I do. He stomped around yelling roar while Lennon laughed. Naraya watched from the corner, one hand gripping a paper plate tighter than she needed to. The birthday was small, intimate, warm. They played music, sang the birthday song, helped Cairo blow out candles while he clapped mid-blow. Took photos on Naraya's phone, and when Cairo sat down to open presents, Lennon's gift was a hardcover pop-up book about the planets. Do they move? Cairo asked. They pop up, Lennon explained, but we can pretend they move. Want to read it later? Cairo nodded, then went off to build a rocket out of shoeboxes and tape with his friends. After the guests left, and Cairo lay on the couch asleep, icing on, his cheek and party hat slightly tilted, Naraya cleaned up quietly. Lennon stood, helping fold napkins. You didn't have to stay, she said. I know. I wanted to. He moved carefully, only touching what she handed him. Finally, Naraya paused. You handled today well. Thank you, he said, voice low. She hesitated. He's starting to expect you. I noticed. And you're okay with that? Lennon looked at her fully. I'll keep showing up, even when he forgets me some weeks, even when he gets mad that I wasn't there before. I'll earn it. Whatever he's willing to give. That night, after Lennon left and the apartment was quiet, Naraya sat on the edge of Cairo's bed, brushing a curl from his forehead. 3, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. He murmured in his sleep. And as she stood to leave, she paused by the hallway, then turned back and whispered to the empty room, You've got a village now. Not just me. The silence in the apartment was rare. After Cairo's birthday party, after the cake was cleared and the toys stashed in corners, after the kids left and Lennon said goodbye, Naraya found herself sitting on the balcony alone, legs tucked under her, a cup of chamomile in her hands. But the door slid open again. She turned. Lennon stepped out, still holding the trash bag he'd offered to take out earlier. I forgot to say bye properly, he said. She smiled, small and tired. You already did. I know. He glanced at the sky. Still felt incomplete. The air outside was crisp, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the apartment rooftops. The light painted everything gold. Lennon leaned against the railing, arms folded, not intruding on her space. Just present. Naraya took another sip. You were good with him today. He made it easy. No, you made it easy for him to trust you. He turned slightly. I'm still learning how to be someone Cairo feels safe around. She nodded, her voice gentler. You're doing okay. For a long moment, they just stood in silence. No music, no notifications, no toddler noise. Just two people bound by a boy they never planned to raise together. Did you ever picture this? She asked suddenly. He didn't look surprised by the question. Not like this, no. Me neither. A pause. But it doesn't feel wrong, he added. Her eyes flicked to him, then away. No, she whispered. It doesn't. He finally sat in the chair beside her. Not close enough to touch, but near enough for warmth to pass between them. I saw how you looked at him when he opened your gift, she said softly. I was scared he wouldn't like it. You picked a planet book. His favorite. I called the librarian who used to run Storytime. Asked what boys his age love. She turned slowly, blinking. You did that? He nodded. I don't know everything about him, but I know I want to learn. That did something to her. Not just as Cairo's mother, as a woman. Naraya looked away, trying to push down the flicker. She shouldn't feel this, but how could she not? He wasn't the man who disappeared anymore. He was here now, soft-spoken, patient, showing up even when he had no promise of reward. That kind of consistency could shake foundations. I kept Cairo from you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept myself from him first, Lennon replied. She looked at him. You're not angry? I was. At me. Not you. He ran a hand through his hair. I was selfish. I thought I could compartmentalize everything. My ambition, my family, my relationship with you. Turns out, you can't separate your heart from your choices forever. The wind picked up slightly. She hugged her robe tighter. Without thinking, Lennon stood and stepped behind her, gently pulling the second blanket from the chair and draping it over her shoulders. She froze, then let herself accept it. Thank you, she murmured. His hand lingered for just a breath too long. He stepped away quickly, clearing his throat. I'll take out the trash now. Naraya looked up at him, eyes softer than they had been in years. Stay a little longer? He froze, slowly turned. You sure? She nodded once. He set the trash bag down beside the door, then walked back. This time, he didn't sit in the separate chair. He took the edge of her lounger, not crowded, not pressed close, but beside her. She didn't move. The sky shifted from gold to amber to a bluish grey. They talked about Cairo, about how he loved jelly beans more than cupcakes, about how Naraya still hadn't figured out how to explain where babies came from when he asked, about how Lennon still left too many socks on the floor, and how he was learning to fold toddler clothes from YouTube. They laughed. They didn't mean to. But it felt good, familiar, dangerously easy. You've changed, she said quietly. I had to, he said. Regret makes you either bitter or better. He looked at her then. Do you regret me? Naraya inhaled. I regret how I felt, back then. And now? She looked at him, heart thudding. I don't know yet. He didn't press. Instead, he stood. Then, I'll let you rest. She stood too, instinctively walking him to the door. At the frame, he paused, then turned. If you ever want help, he said, with bedtime, with Cairo's dentist visits, or just breathing, I'm here. She nodded, then did something she didn't expect. She leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. Not a kiss, just closeness, just heat, just something gentle in a life that had been too sharp for too long. When he left, she touched her chest. The ache there wasn't pain. It was something waking up. The morning sun poured through the blinds in slanted gold streaks. Naraya blinked against the light, still curled on the edge of her bed. Cairo had crawled in some time before dawn, his tiny arm thrown across her middle, clutching his favorite stuffed koala. She watched his chest rise and fall. Peaceful, unbothered, the way a child should be. But she wasn't peaceful, not after last night, not after the way Lennon had looked at her. Not like the mother of his child, but like a woman he was still trying to understand, like someone he wasn't ready to let go of. Naraya slipped out of bed gently, careful not to wake Cairo. She moved through her morning routine, but everything felt different. The same kitchen, the same coffee mug, the same reflection in the hallway mirror. But she wasn't the same. Lennon had shown up, not once, not twice, but consistently, and not with grand gestures or rehearsed apologies, with juice boxes, with book recommendations, with jokes that made Cairo giggle so hard his belly ached. It was harder to keep the door closed when the man standing outside wasn't knocking. Anymore, he was waiting quietly, respectfully, with time on his side. Later that morning, Cairo sat at the small dining table, drawing. Naraya stood at the sink, watching the lines he scribbled across the paper. "What you making, baby?" she asked. "It's Daddy and me." "And you?" She smiled. "Let me see." He held it up. 3 stick figures stood under a crooked sun. One had a cape. Another had long hair. The smallest had a crown. "Who's the king?" she asked, laughing softly. "Me," Cairo declared. "And Daddy's my sidekick." She raised a brow. "What about me? You're the queen. You make the rules." She blinked. Cairo went back to coloring. Naraya went back to dishes. But her hands moved slower now, her mind elsewhere. That evening, Lennon came by earlier than expected. He didn't knock this time. He texted first. "Can I come up?" She said yes. He brought groceries, fresh strawberries, whole milk, a box of dinosaur-shaped macaroni he said he saw on TikTok and thought Cairo would love, and cinnamon tea. "Didn't know if you were running low," he said, placing it gently on the counter. She was, but she didn't say it out loud. Dinner wasn't planned, but it happened. Cairo chewed macaroni with glee, laughing between bites. Lennon helped him wash up after, his sleeves rolled up, water splashed across the sink. Naraya leaned in the doorway and watched. Later, when Cairo finally fell asleep, Lennon lingered. Naraya offered him tea. He didn't say no. They sat on the couch, cushions between them, the TV playing some documentary no one was watching. The silence grew thick. She broke it. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back after all this time?" He turned. "I saw a boy on the street one morning. He had a small backpack, curly hair, a smile that reminded me of someone. And I couldn't stop thinking, what if I missed it? What if I missed being someone to a child that looks like that?" Naraya's throat tightened. "That was Cairo?" "No. Just another kid." "Then why Cairo?" "Because the next day I saw the photo you posted, his birthday, and I couldn't deny it anymore. He's mine. And you were the only person who ever made me feel like I could become something, not just build something." She stared at him, breath caught. "And you want to become what, Lennon?" He looked her dead in the eye. "Worthy." It knocked against her chest like a fist. Because deep down, all this time, she'd wanted to feel that too. Seen, valued, not just useful or responsible, but worthy of love, of softness, of someone choosing her when there was no obligation. The clock ticked on. Neither moved. Then Lennon stood slowly. "I won't rush you," he said, "but I'll keep showing up, until you believe I'm not the man who left." She nodded, unable to speak. At the door, he paused. "And Naraya?" She looked up. "Happy Mother's Day," he said. She blinked. "It's tomorrow." Then he walked out, closing the door softly behind him. And Naraya sat down on the couch, tea forgotten, because for the first time in a long time, She didn't feel like she was raising Cairo alone. She felt like something was beginning. Not repeating, not fixing, but beginning. The sound of Cairo's soft breathing behind the bedroom door reminded Naria of everything she stood to lose. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes locked on Lennon as he paced slowly near the window. He wasn't saying much, but his silence wasn't cold. It was weighted, thoughtful, different from the man who once vanished before sunrise. "I didn't come back for a second chance," Lennon finally said, voice low. "I came because I never stopped wondering who you became after that night." Naria felt something twist inside her. "You barely knew me." "I knew enough," he said, turning toward her. "You were the one person in that whole summit who didn't want anything from me. You listened, you challenged me, and for one night, I forgot how exhausting my life had become." She exhaled slowly. "But then, you left." "I did." He nodded. "And I regretted it the minute I got on that flight." There was a long pause. "Why didn't you try harder to find me?" she asked. He looked her straight in the eyes. "Because I was a coward, and because I didn't think someone like you would want to be found by someone like me." His honesty hit her harder than any excuse would have. "I didn't expect you to come back," she whispered. "But I did expect you to stay gone." Lennon walked over and leaned gently against the opposite counter. "Tell me what you need from me now, Naria." She stayed quiet for a beat, weighing her words carefully. "I need Cairo to come first, always. I need you to understand that he doesn't need a hero. He needs consistency." Lennon nodded slowly. "And I need to take this slow," she added, softer this time, "because I don't trust easily, not with love." Lennon took a step closer. "Then I'll earn it. One moment at a time." She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe in the man he was now. Not the one who disappeared, but the one who stood in front of her now, asking to rebuild what they never had a chance to start. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. They sat on the couch, talking about Cairo's favorite books, her mother's strength, his fear of failing, at fatherhood, and the things they'd both sacrificed to get through life on their own terms. It was after midnight when he finally left, but not before placing a small Lego figurine in Cairo's pencil box for him to find in the morning. Weeks passed. They saw each other more frequently now, sometimes with Cairo, sometimes alone. They co-parented softly at first, without labels or pressure. Lennon never tried to rewrite the past. He simply focused on being present. He helped with errands, brought Naria warm tea during late-night work sprints, and learned how to cook her favorite Nigerian dishes, often texting her photos of his progress with captions like, "This jollof tastes like betrayal, but I tried." Naria laughed more now. And when she laughed, Lennon watched her like she was the only light in the room. One Sunday afternoon, Naria's mother visited. Lennon offered to make dinner. "You didn't tell me he could cook," her mother said, eyeing Lennon cautiously as he prepped vegetables. "He couldn't," Naria murmured with a smile. "He learned for us." Her mother didn't speak for a while. Then she sat across from Lennon and asked, "Why now? Why come back?" Lennon looked her in the eye. "Because I was blind before. And now I see what I almost missed out on." Her mother studied him carefully. "You know what it means to raise a child alone." "I don't," Lennon admitted. "But I know what it means to show up now and never stop." That night, after her mother left, Naria looked at Lennon differently, not with suspicion, but with hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for the kind of love she'd stopped believing in. By spring, Cairo had grown attached to Lennon. He still called him Mr. Lennon, but his joy was evident every time he ran to the door to greet him. One rainy night, Cairo had a fever. Naria panicked. She couldn't get his temperature down, and the nearest pediatric clinic had a wait list. She called Lennon, not because she had to, but because she knew she could. He arrived within 15 minutes, soaked in rain, carrying a humidifier, a cooling patch, and pediatric electrolyte sachets. They sat together through the night, taking turns wiping Cairo's forehead, reading to him in soft voices, humming lullabies in the dim light of Naraya's small living room. When Cairo finally drifted into a peaceful sleep, Lennon stayed. He didn't leave until morning. Weeks turned into months. Their connection deepened. One night, after putting Cairo to bed, Naraya stepped onto her small balcony where Lennon stood, holding 2 cups of tea. She took one, their fingers brushing. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "That one night?" He turned to her. "No, it led me to my son, and back to you." She looked away, heart thudding. "I never stopped thinking about that night," she admitted. "Even when I told myself I hated you." "I deserved that hate," he said. "But I'm here now, Naraya, and I'm not going anywhere." The rain started falling lightly, but neither of them moved. Naraya stepped closer, placing her cup down. She touched his cheek, warm despite the chill, then stopped standing outside my door. Lennon looked at her, confused. She smiled. "Come in. Stay. For real this time." He kissed her. Not like the rooftop night years ago, eager, sudden, impulsive. This kiss was slower, deeper, rooted in everything they'd survived, everything they were choosing now. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission. It came after all the right ones had been granted. They didn't rush. Even when passion stirred, they paced it gently. They cooked together, co-wrote bedtime stories for Cairo, built a bookshelf from scratch, and spent quiet evenings curled up on the couch watching science documentaries. They argued sometimes about parenting styles, late replies to texts, and who left the fridge open. But every time, they circled back. They listened, they learned, they healed. On the first anniversary of the day Lennon walked back into her life, he surprised Naraya with a private celebration at the Children's Museum. After hours, he had decorated the robotics lab with fairy lights and Naraya's favorite blue orchids. Cairo was with her mother for the night. "You've given me more than I ever thought I deserved," Lennon said, standing beside a 3D display of their first invention together, an adaptive learning kit for kids in underserved communities. "I didn't give you anything," she replied. "You showed up and earned it." Lennon reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Naraya's breath caught. "Before you open this," he said, "it's not a ring, yet." She laughed. He opened it. Inside was a pendant, shaped like a DNA double helix, embedded with a tiny chip that, when scanned, played a voice memo, Cairo's voice saying, "My family builds things, like love." Tears welled in Naraya's eyes. "You two are my greatest creation," Lennon whispered. She kissed him, long and slow. This time, no questions hung between them. Just answers, just peace, just love, earned, steady, and real. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll just yet. You followed Naraya and Lennon through heartbreak, healing, and real love. And, if you're still here, you're the kind of viewer who values true connection. Can you relate to loving someone despite the risk? Have you ever had to start over, for yourself or for someone you love? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your favorite moment from their journey. And if you believe in second chances too, give this video a like. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional, life-changing love stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next one. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Thank you for watching.